Today, our guest is Liz Plank, who wrote this book, For the Love of Men. And there's like a big picture of you on the back. So
there is a big picture of me in the back.
make sure it's really you, right? Like
Just so people
like
know. Yeah, it's not the other Liz Plank.
And it's a really good book. You could see how many like tabs I have in it of like.
Wow, that's so impressive. That's so impressive. That's, it's so funny. Weirdly, when, I don't know, because I had never written a book before. So I was thinking about all these cool things. Like, I was like, it'd be cool if we could insert some of those little like stubs in there, and just as like to go with the colors of the book. And everyone just stared at me like, what are you talking about? So I love that you went with the design that I wanted.
Good.
An accessorized book.
I guess so. Well, this book came out. I think I was right at the very beginning. I know I was right at the beginning of writing Father Figure when it came out, and I read it. I got it right away, and I read it. And and I'll tell you, when I know I had written the very first part of Father Figure at the time, and I had a whole part about road trips and how my dad wouldn't let me pee on road trips, but more importantly about how he wouldn't ask for directions. And then I read your book where you do this whole thing with directions. I'm like, I gotta cut it because Liz Plank beat me to it. But I think you do it in a really great way. You use it as like a metaphor or maybe a signifier. I don't know. Yeah, we don't need to know exactly what it is. As sort of like all the problematic attributes of masculinity, and I think you call it precarious manhood.
Yes, and I don't call it that. Very fancy researchers call it that. So it's actually a concept that's called precarious manhood, which there's no female equivalent for it because there is no word for emasculation. That's what Esther Perel, right? And the social experiment that we did together, in which she said that, and I quote her in the book. And yeah, and I'm, a French speaker too. And there's all these words in French too for emasculation that don't exist for women. So women's woman card, right, that's just not even a term for a reason, right? Because women can sort of tap into masculine traits, and we can wear pants, right? And obviously that latitude is not as generous for Black women, for gender non-binary or queer women, trans women, right? Like it's not equal for everybody, but it's not as transgressive and as, I think, punitive and as surveilled as manhood seems to be in our society and many other societies around the world. So precarious manhood is this idea that researchers really came up with, a concept that they came up with after having done a lot of research, seeing that men's masculinity was taken away from them, and that they, by virtue of participating in feminine activities or characteristics, right? Or if also, and so this creates this situation where men are constantly proving their manhood, because the minute that they stop proving it, it's like, the way I described it in my TED Talk was like blowing like an air mat, like when you're blowing up like a giant kid's pool or like air mattress at the beach or something like that, and there's like a hole in it, and you're like, you keep blowing, you're like, this is very exhausting, and I feel like I'm not getting any results. Like the more I blow, the more it goes out. So my book, and I think I know the work that you're doing too, is sort of trying to fix that hole and to be like, okay, instead of just like keep blowing into this air mattress that's never going to be blown up, and this void really that's never going to be filled, like let's maybe think about why that void is there, why that hole is there, and how we can actually maybe patch it up, and so yeah, that was a really powerful moment for me in terms of why this book was really important.
So I have a question. Do you know, is your book being read by more men or by more women who are giving it to men?
I was told, right, like women are going to buy this book first. And, first, like, and I just never really, I really didn't write this book for women. I wanted to write, I wanted to write it for everybody, but I definitely wanted to be helpful to men and men to want to read it. And I will say, yeah, more women bought it at first. There were still men that did, and it was pretty incredible. I tell this story of like, a lot of people passed on the book because, this was also, by the time the book came out in 2019, I'd been working on it for 4 years. So I, wrote a book proposal about masculinity, kind of at a time where I think, Me Too was sort of percolating, and we were, we're always, I think, not always, but we were having still a lot of feminist conversations, but not necessarily thinking about like men's harder side. I got told by like one of the first meeting I went to, they were like, men are not going to buy this book. Like they literally said that to me. I remember thinking like, it's one of those moments where you're like, okay, one day when my book is made and sold and like all these men buy it, I'm going to be able to tell this story, And so here I am telling the story. So they told me, men will not buy this book. And then, the book came out, ended up being published by St. Martin's Press. And, they've been absolutely wonderful. And they were like sold from, the first moment I met them. But basically one of the editors from St. Martin's got a text the morning that I went on Morning Joe to talk about the book. And her boyfriend was like, we have to go to the bookstore. And she was like, why? Like, what is it? And he was like, I have to go buy this book. And she was like, oh, what's the book? And he was like, I don't know. It's about men. This woman was like, and she was like, I couldn't imagine the kind of man that would buy this book, but now I'm dating him, And so it was this really kind of, it made me feel happy. And now also, it's been out for 2 years, a lot more men now. I'm getting more feedback and more messages from men than women. So it's super heartening. And I'm very happy to have seen that evolution. And I wonder what it'll be for your book. Like, did anyone tell you this will be, even though it's about fatherhood, women are going to buy it first?
The folks at Little Brown who published it have always been really, really supportive of it. But many people said from the beginning, men don't really buy books.
Yeah, exactly.
But, like we hope that they will, and we think it's a good book to get out there. But we're confused about who the market is.
Yeah.
So absolutely that's been the case. But I wrote Father Figure from the perspective, which what you just described is really encouraging, which is that I really believe that and willing and want to change the way that they interact in the world. And the problem is we don't really have a model for it. It doesn't exist, right? It's not what we see on TV. It's not what we see in the movies. It's not what we see anywhere except for a few books here and there. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's so weird to me. And once you start talking to men about the lies, it's like a Pandora, it's just like, whoa, I think what we see, it's like an iceberg, right? So there's something in some conversations, but it's like what's actually underneath is far bigger and I think far more profound than we realize.
Yeah. I think I put in my notes here in quotes, so I'm guessing it's something you said, which is there's a male shame spiral. Is that your term, the male shame spiral? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it's particularly brilliant, but it's that was what I kept. That was the image, really the visual for me that kept popping up when I was talking to men about this, just like how much of this was about shame. And the thing about shame is that it's corrosive for your relationships with other people and your relationship with yourself. And shame starts really, really early. Like shame for men, I think is actually, it's a man's issue, but it's a boy issue. Like it's a children issue because a lot of men, classic sort of question that I mean, it wasn't classic. I thought it was like going to be kind of a random question. It was just like, what was a toy that you were told that you weren't allowed to play with as a boy? And I read the responses. I asked that on Facebook because sometimes I would just kind of be alone, as you do when you write a book and you're like, am I nuts? Like, so I would really, I mean, I'm very thankful for especially the community of men on Facebook for some reason that are just have been incredibly vocal and engaging on these topics. So I just asked, I just asked it on Facebook, and the responses brought me to tears. Like, it was everything from like, easy bake ovens to stuffed animals. Like, one man was like, I wanted this like little puppy stuffed animal, and I cried. I did this whole meltdown at McDonald's, and then like my dad finally got it for me, but he said, you can only play with it when no one else is watching. Like, you have to do it as a secret, right? It's this shame. So this idea that, what you want and who you are, there's something wrong with that, and you need to hide it from other people. So you need to put on this social mask in front of other people. So, and then, there was a lot of humiliation too that was tied to the shame for men. And I think humiliation is a topic I would love to hear more men talk about, because it's really one of the core ways that manhood is policed and surveilled. There was one man that talked about having like this little shopping cart toy that he liked to play with. And he came home one night and like his dad and his friends had destroyed it, like in this ritualistic, just almost this ritual of humiliation. So I'm just like, and those are just toys, like, right? Like, how much we freak out over nail polish, right? Over dresses, skirts, necklaces, right? Any kind of, I mean, it just shows us that, like, I don't know, it's like, this isn't about the nail polish. Like, this isn't about the shopping cart. This is about you. And I think it makes me really sad to think about how much shame so many men are carrying around. And then when we don't give men the tools to understand themselves, understand their emotions, right, and understand others as well, it's just kind of a recipe for disaster, for isolation, for mental health issues, suicide, radicalization, right? Like, you start seeing like all of the issues in our society. We're like, oh, men are just, inherently shitty. And I'm like, I don't know, because it feels like we should try and change the way that they're raised before we make these kinds of grand statements. And then maybe we would see a lot of unsolvable problems become a lot more solvable.
Yeah, you had a quote on either TikTok or Instagram that I wrote down that said that it just struck me. You said men's relationship with their gender is a greater determinant of their behavior than their actual gender.
I know. I'm obsessed with this. I'm obsessed with all the studies that like talk about this, because so often, and I talked about this in the context of COVID and some of the behaviors that men have adopted. And at the beginning of COVID, it was like, men aren't wearing masks, or men are less likely to wear masks. Men are more likely to, be against lockdowns or hygiene. They're less likely to wash their hands, right? Like, men are just like shittier. Like they just don't, they're selfish and they don't want to take care of other people and they don't want to take care of themselves. And then a couple months ago, a brilliant researcher was like, let's see if this is like, let's try and understand, is it all men? Is it some men? Which men? Right? Which is such an important question with women, right? That we do differentiate between groups of women. And I think we have more nuanced perspectives when it comes to gendered analysis for women, because I think we see women as gendered and we don't necessarily see men as gendered, right? We don't see masculinity as a gender. And so this brilliant researcher, took stock of women and men's attitudes towards COVID and the vaccine particularly. And what they found was that when you compare men, and well, first of all, you ask them how they identify. Very masculine, somewhat masculine, not masculine. And they sort of were able to again, add more nuance. And what you find is that the men who don't identify as very masculine actually have behaviors that are very similar to women's. Okay. So the gendered differences, the contrast almost is inexistent for men who don't have overt identification with masculinity. Now, the men who identify as very masculine were like 3 times more likely to have contracted COVID. They were, to say that they've contracted it, they were far more likely to have gathered in groups of 10 or more in the last few months or over the last year. They were less likely to want to get the vaccine, right? Like, and then we start seeing, okay, so actually, it is not men's gender that predicts their behavior. It's their relationship to their gender that seems to be the big indicator. And what makes me, as you can see, so nerdy about it, and I get very excited about this kind of data because it shows us that that is malleable. It means that men aren't boys will be boys, right? This idea that like men are just men and they're just stupid and they're just dumb and they're just selfish, they're just violent. Like, it's actually not true. Like, look at the data. And this isn't the first. In my book, I reference a few studies that have started to do this with, in terms of not car accidents, but like behavior on the streets. So men who identify more overtly with traditional masculinity are more likely to break rules and to, violate traffic, or do traffic violations. They're less likely to wear condoms and practice safe sex. We know that there is a wealth of study on this, or a wealth of, there is a lot of data on this. But we need to apply this to everything. Like, I don't want to see another single study about men that doesn't ask them about this, because that's how we're actually going to understand that there's nothing inherently, biologically determined with men, in the same way that there isn't something with women, right? Like, we've come around to that, right? This idea that women are not one way, and we were kind of like, well, there's a whole spectrum of ways of being a woman, and we have to accept the same thing with men. It's the same thing. We're the same human. We have the same organs, like we have the same brain, we have the same amygdala, and all the parts are the same.
Do you think culturally that we collectively struggle more with seeing this range with men than with women?
Yeah. Because we still, we've kind of accepted, or it's now politically incorrect, right? Not to say that some people won't still do it, but it used to be. I mean, one of the first articles I ever wrote was like questioning the New York Times 8 years ago when I moved to New York, because they had a headline that was like, in the room for debate section, that said, "Can women lead?" Okay. And that was Rachel Sklar, right? The list. We were all just like, we could not believe this group of women, this amazing listserv that was created by Rachel Sklar and Glynis McNichol, who's so never say it right. We were really upset about that. And I ended up writing an article and saying, like, why would the New York Times even ask this question? Like, why would that even be up for debate? But it was like, they had some like neuroscience, whatever, evolutionary, saying like women are made to nurture or whatever. And then, the New York Times rescinded that headline. And that was a big moment. That was a big turning point, around 2013, where women were being more critical online, and it was in many respects, and things were changing. And so now it's less acceptable. Like, a headline like that would be like an Onion headline. Right. But with men, we're still stuck in that old way of thinking, where we just think that's how they are. That's just the way it is. They're just different. And when we expect
what is up with these neuroscientists who are still pushing the nurture argument and actually have degrees?
Well, good question. I talk a little bit about it in the book, and I think I would love to see more people write about this. there's a really good book from Cordelia Fine, who she actually talks a lot about this, and I think it's called Testosterone Rex.
Yeah.
And so she dispels a lot of these myths just around testosterone and what testosterone like is. But the thing is, these fields are largely populated by white men, white, straight, cisgender, able-bodied white men, right? And so that's a perspective. It's a valid one, but it's one perspective. And when you have that one perspective, yes, just make up so much of the majority of the studies that are from that perspective, it starts to make us think that that's just the truth, that that's just the science. But actually, there's so much to talk. This is like a whole topic, but even like the idea of the lone wolf, like the alpha is from wolf packs.
Yeah.
And now has been completely dispelled that like packs are actually led by a female and a male wolf. And they're not alphas because they're dominant and they're aggressive and they're like, right, like have those ideas that we associate with the alpha. They're alphas because they are nurturing the pack. They're feeding the pack of wolves, which is their family. So even, we are human beings. And so we'll ascribe human qualities, right, to animals and to theories that sort of come in, but we're fallible. And that's why it's so important for fields like neuroscience, for anthropology, for evolutionary theory, to be more diverse, because that'll give us a fuller understanding and analysis of human behavior.
Well, I'm back to what you're just saying about alpha for a second. I'm all for like bringing up what I like to call feminist toxic masculinity, and I'm going with the like, I'm so alpha, I'm over alpha.
Wait, tell me more. So is it like, is feminist toxic masculinity? It's what?
Man up to feminism.
Right. And like, there's a whole other, I don't know, thing that I'm sensing, which is also a little bit of like performative male allyship that's also occurring, where it's kind of cool, which I think is great that it is cool to talk about masculinity. But where, I think it's important when men get a lot of credit and a lot of high fives for saying feminist things, that they are aware that like their comment section looks very different from my comment section and Amanda's comment section, a Black woman's comment section, a trans woman's comment section, and et cetera. So I want men to talk about this stuff. I also think it's important. It's important. I mean, this is where it's like your liberation is tied to mine. Yeah. And if you're just using, feminist literature to go, oh my God, it's so sad to be a man. Look how sad it is. And that you're not being like, wow, it's so sad to be a man. And look at how this is hurting her too. And let's join together. Like, I just think I get a little like sus, so sus as the kids say, suspicious.
Yes. I call that the hold my balls while I cry syndrome.
Love that. Love that you have coined that term. Hold my balls while I cry. That is amazing. That's exactly what it feels like to be around those guys. It's like exactly right.
But actually, I want to. I am serious, but I want to add a serious conversation into that, because I know that you have said you say it in the book that some things are problematic about the way we currently use the term toxic masculinity. So I'm wondering if you can say a bit about why you feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just interested in impact generally. And what I realized was that although I don't think that we should, like, it frustrates me that the word toxic masculinity is like so scary and controversial, but I don't really care to use another word if that is going to mean that the men who are toxic, right, listen and are interested in changing. And so, yeah, I think for a lot of people, I mean, there's a lot of people who think that I am catering to the male gaze, or that I am just catering to men in general, that I'm reinforcing patriarchy by being concerned with how men receive my message, and how men sort of come into this conversation. And yeah, I don't really care why you end up here. Like, I don't. I don't. As long as you're here, that's great. Let's do this. Right. And that's where I sort of use this metaphor a lot, because it's helpful for me, that feminism shouldn't be like a speakeasy, should be a block party. And I'm actually interested in us making this fun, because no one goes to a party because they know it's going to suck, or like that they're going to be put in a corner and told not to talk. You know what I mean? And I also think
absolutely. Our relationship, I hope, is a model for that, because Jordan he's first of all picks apart my feminism all day long, which I love.
Ooh.
Challenges me. And
it doesn't sound good when you say it that way.
No, but like, even in my own unconscious, things, misogyny that shows up in myself or toward my daughter or whatever, that he's constantly highlighting, which I love.
That's wonderful. Yeah, because we can't see it. I think, well, what's an example? Because I think that's so brilliant. Because we're programmed too by misogyny. Well, I mean, not too, everyone is, but women are. It's so hard to deprogram yourself. I mean, I have a master's degree in this shit, and I'm still like, what? What did you just say to yourself? Like,
yeah, I mean, just my favorite example of late is we didn't live together for the first 10 years of our relationship.
Wow.
And whenever I would bring it up, he would say, because I don't want to reproduce any of the unconscious, things that would make you my property, which is what, inevitably might happen. So we live together now. We'll see it. So far, it hasn't happened. He still does all the cooking and the cleaning because he's better at it. But that was one example, which I always really appreciated, even though I did want to live together at times earlier. And then another one is just because we have 3 sons and a daughter here as a merged family. And oftentimes I treat our daughter differently. And he is a real stand for her, and it's really showing up in who she's becoming as a result of being.
How do you treat her differently? How does it show up for you?
It could be all sorts of, like, just, it's a little more comfortable for me to ask her to set the table with me versus like asking the boys. It is constant. It's I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I bet you if we looked at every single element in the day, I'm still treating her a little bit differently than I'm treating the boys. And he's gently, not consistently, but
not consistently gentle is what she means.
No, but I love when because I don't even see it, and sometimes it's a safety for me. Whatever. We could analyze this all day long, but those are some interesting.
I think it's good to say that, that we're all imperfect and we're all doing our best, and that this is so freaking, like, it's an algorithm. It's like our brains are our computers. And so to change the software is, damn, like, I mean, even like yesterday, I was thinking about how, even like the solutions to, like, we,
you froze.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, great. I'm back. Sorry. Edit out all the. So I was thinking about this, the patriarchy produces all kinds of problems that are linked to patriarchy, but also produces all kinds of
interference to make sure we can't, like internet interference to make sure we can't have this conversation.
Yes, it's the incel network that's fucking. I mean, that would be the way to fuck with me, I will say, if the incels are listening. Am I back though now or no?
Yes, you're back now.
Okay. So yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday, how the patriarchy creates problems, right? That stem from the patriarchy, but it also produces solutions, right? The solutions that we come up for stuff because of our patriarchal programming are just not as good. And I was thinking about, domestic violence, that, so a woman who's done nothing wrong, who's vulnerable, because she's in a situation of violence. We're going to remove her from her safe haven. We're going to remove her from her home. We're going to now create more problems for her because we're shifting her away from, we're uprooting her life, perhaps her children's life. We know that children are a huge part of why women can't, leave their abuser. Like, why isn't she leaving? It's like, why isn't he leaving? Like what? Even that sort of like, we put the responsibility on the women to control or somehow modify a man's behavior, which is not in our control for either. No one has control over other people's behaviors. Sorry to break it to you. And so why don't we have shelters for violent men? Why don't we remove violent men from their household? Because they're the ones who've done something wrong. They're the ones who are endangering other people, right? Like it's just wild. Like,
there's so many, this is where I feel like feminism is right now. Cause I spent 10 years building a financial media company to teach women about money.
I know, it's so great.
Yeah.
I need it.
What's that?
I need it. I'm like,
Totally.
It's so important. It's so important.
But I realized I spent 10 years trying to rewire women's brains to think differently about investing.
Yeah.
But the reality is that like the banks there's still such strong patriarchy, and it's the banks that need to change to adapt to how women manage money versus, and it just kind of makes me look at that 10 years I spent doing that and going, no, wait, why do women have to do all the work? Why can't the surrounding architecture
institutions? And so how should institutions shift to adapt to women?
Well, it's not a biological difference between men and women in terms of money. It's a cultural one. And because women have grown up with all these cues that investing should be a man's job, and if you invest well, you're unfeminine and you won't be loved, women take longer to make investment decisions. And this is the big breakdown, is because women take longer and ask more questions, banks evaluate their marketing, which is how they get new customers, based on speed. And what we found at Daily Worth was that while we were like the hot thing for a long time, our ad spend, dropped massively when they're like, we get a lot more if we just spend on Market Watch. But they, if you subscribe to any of these ideals and the benefits of a less patriarchal society, then that includes women being, sophisticated with money. And that means understanding that she is going to take longer to move assets because it's a newer conversation.
Wow. So true. Yeah. Anyway.
But I want to like with this idea that institutions need to change, and absolutely, I obviously believe men need to change. But one thing I want to ask you, Liz, is I wonder if you could talk a bit about, when that inclination actually isn't doing what people think it is, the sort of benevolent sexism.
Yeah, benevolent sexism. Such a fun concept. It's basically like sexism with a wink, right? It's sexism with a smile. It's like you're smiling, but you're like, wait, this doesn't feel good. Like something's wrong about this. So very classic examples of this are how we, you'll be in a meeting and you're a woman, you're one of the few women at the meeting, and they'll be like, can you take notes? You're just better at it. Can you do the lunch order? You just you get it so right. And it's like, okay, so that's a compliment, but also work. Like because you're just giving me extra work, but then it's like you're giving me a backhanded compliment to justify the inequality. So for men, it can look very similar. It happens to men too, right? When we make them do physical labor and we're like, oh, can you do this for me? Like, you're just better. And it's like, sure, there can be, you're looking,
no,
I don't want to create conflict.
Very reversed in this household, as I'm sure it is in many. But.
Yeah. Well, it's just, yeah. So it's, I think, important to talk about a lot of, this is where I also saw, the data shows it as well. Like it can really be corrosive for relationships where, women will fall into a role that's more traditional, staying at home or managing the household. And then the man will be, more of a quote unquote breadwinner but then want something in return, right? There's a lot of it's a way to sort of trap people in roles, making them think that that's going to make them happy, but actually, couples, like women who ascribe to benevolent sexism, that they want to be taken care of, right? That they want a man to just tend to be less happier in their relationship. So that, I think I'm not telling women who, and I had to unprogram myself from that for sure. And I sort of talk about, this chivalry diet that I go on the book, because I was like, wait a minute, I can't criticize women and men for, ascribing to old traditional roles if I'm actually perpetuating them in my own life. So I get that it's a very old programming, but it strains our relationship. It creates a lot of resentment, right? Like in 12-step programs, they say expectations are just resentments waiting to happen, right? Or something like that. Like that you create all these expectations about what your partner is going to be based on, again, these arbitrary rules of the patriarchy, which, were not created by someone who is a relationship expert or wanting to, who developed, thought about our social emotional development. Like the patriarchy is just like anyway, we can get into that, but it was not created for human, development. And so, it really puts a strain on us as people, and I think on our relationships. And I see so many, I don't think all divorces are caused by the patriarchy, but I think a lot of heterosexual
I bet most
divorces,
of them are actually.
it's
I definitely would
pretty, it's ruining kind of our lives. I gotta say, it's and that's why queer couples just tend to have higher satisfaction in their relationships, and their children are also happier, which says a lot in a country where, trans children are literally, we're co-signing their abuse, and we still live in a homophobic society. But somehow, queer couples, because there's not these predefined rules and roles, they can kind of just be in their relationship, and they kind of choose and have discussions about some of these things, instead of it being an expectation, and then that expectation is not met, and then there's all this resentment.
My understanding is that is true not only about things like domestic labor, but also orgasms.
Yes, absolutely. So we know from the research that feminist couples tend to be far happier. Can you guys hear background, or are you?
No, you're awesome.
No, okay, good. And so couples that are feminist or right, like that identify with feminist principles of equality, just have better sex. I just think it's important for us to repeat that as much as possible, because again, the stereotype is that this, that somehow, I don't know, consent is like, or equality or respecting your partner is somehow going to kill the vibe in the bedroom, when I don't know. I just don't know. I don't follow the argument, but I think it's important to nip it in the bud.
I think we should talk about this a lot more. Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, this is actually at the crux of it. I think it's the physical part of the relationship, which is still, I don't know, I haven't talked about this on camera yet, so stumbling a bit here, but that's partially probably where it's still also hidden, even among super well-intentioned folks, because of fears of vulnerability, but I think that unpacking that further would just be a very entertaining conversation to have.
And women asking for what they want, it's not about the men, also, talking about financial literacy. Like, it took me a long time to, invest my money. It took me a long time to ask for what I wanted too, and to feel comfortable doing that. Again, the models are not there. Like this, gets a little bit more kinky, but I think we don't see those models, on television. We sort of, I grew up with like American Pie, like, like that just wasn't, and there was no equality when it came to it was a very one directional relationship, right? And women were objects and there to perform for men. And again, I don't think men want that. I don't think that feels great in a long-term situation. The
only way it feels great is if you haven't felt the alternative.
That's a good way to put it. That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, exactly. And we have to create those possibilities, for men and women.
Absolutely. I mean, this leads into I wanted to ask some questions to you about gender essentialism in a broad way, but I think I actually want to ask about a really specific one, which I don't think we talk a lot about, which is how often in communities that might identify as liberal or progressive, there's just as much, or even feminist, there's just as much gender essentialism.
Mm-hmm.
There's all this live into your divine goddessness and and balance your masculine and feminine energies. And I don't know, I just kind of wanted to get your take on that, because I feel like in so many places where that are so vocal about equality, they're still reproducing so many of the same misconceptions.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And yeah, it's a different kind of, it's a little bit like benevolent sexism, where it can feel like it's a positive thing, right? And the way that I see this the most is when I hear, particularly, just 1 second.
We should pretend to speak for her while she's. What is she saying? I think she's talking to her cat. She took the earpiece off because she couldn't.
Okay, sorry. So the way I see that play out a lot is when I'm having conversations with men and women too, but I hear it a lot from men who are very progressive and who believe in all the things that we're talking about. And then they'll just say, but women are just better. Women are just like, you guys are just, and I'm like, I know what you mean. And often this comes from men who have been raised by single women who are amazing and who are incredible. And, they unfortunately had a model that, is unfortunate and is not rare, where, the mom did everything and she was there and she was the dependable parent and the father, wasn't. And so I get how, and then I get how when you look at the world, you're like, women are great. Like, what are men doing? But it's based in the same theory that women and men are different. And again, this idea also of like inferiority and superiority, and of like somehow there's like a hierarchy. Right. And to me, so I'd always get annoyed at that. I'm like, we're not better.
More and more as I get deeper into this
Me
work,
too.
the more I even hear anything about like feminine energy or, any of it, I'm just like, no, I can't.
Yeah. And I think for white people do that with people of color, right? It's like, I've many Black female friends who tell me, so we're either subhuman or we're superhuman, and we just want to be human. Like, we're not going to save you, and we're not like we're not different or special. We're just trying to survive in a society that dehumanizes us and does nothing for us, and treats us as second-class citizens. So it actually is kind of dehumanizing to put people and to put women on, and particularly Black women, on pedestals. And this is where also I think for a lot of men and women, but I think particularly for men, they are afraid of feminism because they think, well, men are in charge now. I do this because I'm like, this is the patriarchy in my head, like the hierarchy, like the pyramid. Men are on top and women are at the bottom. So feminists want a reversal of that. They want women on top and men at the bottom. And it's like, we want the whole thing to come down. It's like a rectangle. It's a circle. It's a star, whatever the fuck, right? Like, and it just shows the lack of imagination that we have. And again, this patriarchal setting, that everything must be a hierarchy and that there are always people above. And instead of just thinking like, no one is better or less good than anyone else. We're actually just all human beings. And that's why we want to eradicate patriarchy, so that men can fully exist and reach their full potential as human beings, as emotional creatures, and women can reach their full potential as human beings, as badass bitches and emotional creatures. Like, it's just like everyone can just be who they want to be. So yeah, I think we're super stuck in that. And again, we don't know anything else.
Well, it's very destabilizing, right? Because we are a collection of our stories, and our identity is based on what we believe to be true. And so if you dismantle this core idea of how we understand our existence in the world, you feel really lost, I imagine.
Totally. I get it. And that's the gender binary, and why, we constantly tell trans people they don't exist. It's like, they're there. They literally exist. So you denying that they exist is kind of on, like, it's just kind of scary. It's a scary thing about you, like, because you're denying reality. And so what is so hard about reality that makes you want to completely ignore it? Yeah. So, and I think you're right. It's like people can't imagine anything else.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you one more question before we go about waffles. No, because you have a whole. Because what's interesting is I had forgotten all about the part in your book about your own father and waffles, and I only realized it now when I reread the book to prep for this conversation, and I have a whole video that I made on YouTube about cooking waffles, and I got to that part and I said, Amanda, there's a whole part in here about waffles and waffles and fatherhood. So let's talk about waffles and fatherhood.
Well, I feel like I should get the expert, because I'm actually in Montreal, and my father is in the other room. Yeah. And I feel like we should have him Zoom bomb this part. What do you think?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Absolutely.
Daddy? And he's wearing a sweater that I got him that says, weekends are for waffles.
Whoa. So
no way.
So what's your waffle recipe?
I can hardly hear.
Okay. What's the waffle recipe?
Well, I stopped making waffles on a regular basis a few years ago. So I'm going to try and remember. It's got a lot of eggs in it. If I'm serving like 3 or 4 waffles, there's 4 eggs. There's about a cup of flour. Mm-hmm. There's about, I think it's a cup of milk. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. What else is there?
A lot of love.
The important thing is to separate the eggs and to egg whites separately so that you fold them into the rest very gently.
That's why I was never invited to the process, because I wasn't gentle enough.
That's what makes nice, light,
fluffy waffles. But yeah, we've taken a vegan turn, somewhat plant-based turn for health reasons. And so now you make pancakes. Okay, he made me pancakes every day since I've been here.
You just reminded me.
Wait a second. Don't go anywhere, because
I forgot to mention the butter.
The butter. Yeah, that's major key.
Butter, which after much discussion with my wife, much negotiation with my wife, your mother, okay,
I hope.
I turned into half butter, half oil.
Yeah.
Because oil is so much more healthy.
Well,
olive oil.
No, it's not olive oil. It's what do you call it?
Canola?
Canola and safflower. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen. Since you're not making waffles, I'm going to send you this.
Oh my God, that's so perfect. That's so perfect.
Your mother's gonna love that.
Yeah, loves male allies. That's so cool. I love that shirt. I love it so much.
The other thing I forgot was the sugar.
Okay, the sugar. Okay.
which we also reduced by half on Mummy's orders.
Okay. There we go. And so now, you make pancakes, and you made me pancakes every morning I've been here. This morning was the first morning he made oatmeal, and I was like, what is going on? What is going on? So yeah, I'm very lucky breakfast dad.
Pancakes. It's either pancakes or crepes.
Crepes.
Yeah.
But I demand the pancakes.
When I have
flapjacks.
when I have a bit more time, then I make crepes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Andrew Plank now that you have him?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's very
You're very welcome. Anytime.
I told him, I was like, do you want to just do the interview together? Do you want to just come in? He was like, I haven't had a haircut in so long. I can't, if this is not just audio, I can't. And I was like, all right, maybe you'll Zoom bomb it. So when you asked the direct question about waffles, I needed to get the expert.
Of course, the business about, my COVID haircut.
Yeah.
I even when there's no COVID, I usually look like this. And and then I go to the barber and I say, cut it all off. Then I look okay for about a month. And then after
I like it.
2 or 3 months, it deteriorates.
I think there are a lot of men who would love your head of hair in their 60s.
Well, my barber tells me that a lot of women would like to have my hair.
Yes, women too. It's true, Jordan, you're good too.
Yeah.
You got
this
tons.
is a lot of COVID hair, but it's always pretty big. Well, thank you both so much. This has been a great conversation, and I really, 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 really appreciate your time and your waffle recipe. And send me your address. I'm going to get you a Feminist Dad T-shirt out immediately. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank
Nice
you.
chatting
Nice
with you.
seeing you, Amanda, too.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.